what is artificial intelligence? And it's referring to machines or software that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, right? Set at its simplest. It's machines, software that typically require human intelligence. But is it really all that new? No. If you go back to the 50s even, right? And there was a slide that I think Dan Lin put up that talked about how, most AI was around before most people had televisions. But it was really coined back in the 50s, but it was very basic, of course, at that point. And as we got into the 80s and 90s, there was some advancements with AI that, allowed it to become more capable, but it really worked in predictable environments. It was still too messy for real world data. So I'm going to give you an example. In 1999, the firm that I worked for at the time in the investment world, they had a tool that they called SPA. It stood for Strategic Portfolio Allocation. And SPA was designed to take all the market data and then try and make some prediction and adjustments in the portfolio to get ahead of the market in some ways and maybe take some risk off the table and things like that. But the tool was so messy. How well do you think that thing really performed? It wasn't very good. But it was really the first time that in my career we had something that it was referred to as a automatic intelligence, automated intelligence, artificial intelligence. There was a neural network that came with it. And we were like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. So then you move forward into, the 2010-ish era, and it's starting to pick up some steam. And you're starting to see it in everyday use, like fraud detection. Anybody ever had a fraud alert on your credit card or anything like that? That's AI doing its work. There was spam filtering and credit scoring, but it was still really focused on that structured data. AI consumes data, data, data. And then we get into the last several years where there's been sort of this breakthrough where now AI is really able to learn, right? We've turned these tools into machines that can really learn and anticipate. I'll give you some examples of what that looks like in the past, or what we've seen in the recent past. And you mentioned Claude. There's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, and there's many others that have access to all kinds of data that you can now go into, like what we saw today, and have design work done or ask it questions for yourself or for your business. There's a lot of efficiencies that people are creating. But the point with all of this is it's not new. And so I want to give you another example of where we saw this in the past. The whole premise of this was that a computer, in playing a game of thermonuclear war, somehow got us ready to launch missiles at our enemies. But there's some interesting dialogue here. Listen if you pick it up.
It's learning.
So there you had the mad scientist, right? And what was the key word in there? The computer was learning. So the concept isn't new, but the application is what's becoming more and more prevalent in our society. And if you haven't seen that movie before, if you have, if it haven't, it's been a while, go back and look at it. It was pretty good. But where are these everyday examples where we are engaging with AI? And I heard somebody talk about Alexa. Yes. If you have an iPhone and you're talking to Siri, like, oh, and as soon as I say her name, my phone lights up. So hold on a second. Anytime you say that, think about what you're getting on apps like Netflix or Amazon. Anybody use streaming services? And what
Yes.
and what do they, when you turn on Netflix, what's one of the questions or one of the things that they provide you is, hey, here's some suggestions. Well, where did those suggestions come from?
Algorithms.
They're watching your behavior. They're watching what you're watching. It's data. Yeah, algorithms, right? So they know if you're watching action movies, guess what you're going to get more of? Action movies. Anybody ever say they're talking about buying a car and somewhere near their phone, and when you turn on, your Facebook or something, you've got car ads coming your way, right? They're
Mhm.
consuming the data. Even companies like Amazon, which people think of as a fulfillment company, isn't really a fulfillment company. They're a data company, right? They understand the data behind people's purchasing habits. How many times have you gotten an Amazon alert that says, hey, I bet you're low on paper towel? How do they know that I'm low on paper towel? They've watched what we've done over the course of certain periods of time. So, Netflix, Amazon, Uber. So, if you live in a city like Chicago, like I do, very common that you're going to Uber. And when I get to my destination about an hour later, Uber sends me an alert and says, are you ready to head home? AI. It's anticipating what we're doing. Someone mentioned Alexa and some of the other smart home devices that can detect if the temperature in the house isn't quite what you want it to be and can make those adjustments on your behalf. The GPS and navigation. Many people don't think about the GPS as an AI tool, but it is. How do you know? Anybody ever used their GPS and it starts to reroute you for something?
Hmm.
There's an accident ahead. That would normally have taken a human to figure that out. And here in Chicago, we talk about getting on Lower Wacker Drive. And you know what? It's a problem because there's no GPS service down there. You get down there, you can really be in trouble. So these are just everyday sort of common places where you're seeing or experiencing AI and may not even be thinking about it. But where we're seeing it too, right, that you might be interacting with it is in healthcare. And one of the things that I've seen just really crop up in the last, say, 12 to 18 months is on the fitness programs. People wearing different devices. Maybe it's an Apple Watch, which can track things. There are other devices, like we mentioned here, a Whoop. They call it a Whoop. And all it does is track your data, your heart rate, oxygen
Have that on
levels.
here.
It tracks all this stuff. And when you go to the app, it starts making recommendations for you. Well, here's what your workout should be. Here's how you improve your sleep. You didn't sleep very good last night, so here's some adjustments you can make. Things that would normally take a human to help you with. But we're seeing it also in the early disease detection and creating those personalized treatment plans. And now you can do virtual health assistants where you're literally asking questions and getting the responses that a doctor might give you. And when you think about AI as a tool, the one thing it doesn't bring to the table is emotion. And so there are two elements of life that most people have a lot of emotion around, and one of them is healthcare, their
Yeah.
health. So, yeah, I don't know that it will replace the medical professional per se. I think it will enhance what they're able to do, but not replace. And that's a key with the AI. But you're seeing AI for safety purposes too, like in home, you've got fall detection systems, you got smart home monitoring systems, you got emergency response alerts, and you've got facial recognition. If you've got an iPhone or anything else similar to that, when you look at it, That is an AI function allowing you to get into your phone. And we're really starting to see it in business become more prevalent. So we're using Zoom today. If we were broadcasting this across multiple countries, there is a Zoom instant translator that would take
Mm.
what I'm saying and position it into whatever language the recipient is in. So that's been a huge benefit for businesses who would have in the past maybe struggled with some of the translation elements of doing something like this. This meeting is also being recorded. And do you know what Zoom will do when we are done? It will give us a
Summary.
synopsis. It will give us a synopsis of what was covered, right? And so in business, we're seeing it all the time where you might see people taking a lot of notes or a busy executive having someone sit in the meeting to take notes with them. Now there are AI tools that we use even in around the Charney practice that help us with that, right? That can take the notes from a meeting and turn them into an executive summary that we might send out to a client from time to time, or we might keep those notes in a client file so we can use them in the future. So we're seeing it in business and communication, these voice to text applications, right? So on your iPhone, you can just tell her what you want to say. Hey Siri, I want to text Doug Charney. Tell her what you want to say. And then the one that, some people have a sort of certain feeling about sometimes is the customer service chat bots. Has anybody ever interacted with those? When you go to like a travel website or anything like that, you don't want to wait on hold, perhaps. You're seeing it with even credit card companies have this. So the chat bot for customer service has become more and more prevalent. Personally, I still like to talk to somebody on the phone. That's my ultimate experience that we want. But certainly, there have been times where this has been pretty handy to answer a quick question. AI is always right. It's not always right. AI is not conscious. That's the one thing that people sometimes have a hard time understanding. It's using the data that's available to it. And it doesn't think like a human because there's no emotion attached to it. And it is still a tool that's created and controlled by people. And now you're hearing, right? Even the administration talking about having an AI czar and putting some parameters around the AI tool itself. And the key for for us as individuals is AI is really cool, but you have to know what questions to ask. So it sometimes comes up, well, will this replace a certain professional? Will this replace, financial professionals? Well, you can type in a question and it'll spit out a response, but you may not know if you're asking the right question. Same thing with healthcare, right? The healthcare professionals know what questions to ask to get to a conclusion. It's what they went to school for. And so if somebody comes in and not asking the right questions, the professional can guide the conversation to get someplace productive and not just have a, tool that spits out a wrong answer because you didn't know what question to ask. So let's just remember that it is still powered by humans, and the controls that now they're looking at putting into place will determine how our experience and interactions go with them going forward. And you have to really be safe with AI. There's some things that we're seeing, like voice cloning. How many of you ever have received a spam call in the last 24 hours? And one of the things they're doing is they're waiting for you to pick up the phone and say hello. And now they have your voice. And AI can take that one word that says hello and turn it into a whole sentence. And so, what can they do now? I have your phone or I have your voice. Maybe I call a relative. Maybe I call your financial professional. Hey, send me all my money. So you have to be really careful with some of that stuff. And obviously, protecting your personal data is always paramount. And I think it's important to stick with applications that you know and trust because there's a lot of new things coming out that they want you to, take a picture. That becomes your new profile. That's how you That's how you access the app. If an app is asking you to take a picture of yourself and load it in, I'd be very cautious with that. And then stay informed, right? Ask questions about AI. Who do you ask them to? You can ask AI if you want to, but ask other people too. I can tell you that I have a 19-year-old daughter or son and a 16-year-old daughter, and they do laps around me with how they leverage AI, which we'll talk about here in a second. In our industry, in the investment space, the CFP board has put out a lot of guidance to firms like ours about how interacting with AI is useful, but you have to be really careful. So we've got some guidelines in the industry and firms like Doug's and Prospera. They have guidelines around what tools can be used. They do a lot of the vetting for us. So if we're recording a meeting for purposes of taking notes, and it might be stored somewhere, that data storage is really important for us, so we can protect the integrity of those notes. And there's a lot of integration between technology now, and so making sure that all of the uh, moving parts, the different technologies that talk to each other, are secure. And so just in our industry alone, there's a lot of guardrails and I'll say regulation to make sure that we're operating within the confines of safety for all of our clients. So what does this look like in the future? Hey, we're talking about smarter healthcare. That sounds good. We want to have smarter healthcare so we can stay healthier. They're using AI in ways that allow the practitioner to have better insight into what's going on in your body. That's a pretty cool use of this. Got your more efficient homes, got greater accessibilities, and our learning as adults becomes more enhanced. If you haven't gone on to a Claude or a Chat GPT just to play around, I would highly encourage you to do that. Ask some questions and see what you get. Ask it for some advice. Netflix is giving you advice, Amazon is giving you advice, but you can use these other tools as well. The one piece here that's interesting is the educational uncertainties. So when you think about education, again, I've got two, one in college and one in high school. They don't want the students using AI to write their term papers. But what tool do you think the professors use to determine whether somebody has used AI or not? They're using AI. They're using AI to read the papers for them and determine, hey, was this done by AI or was this done by a student? And it's incredibly powerful to think that they've got the ability to read through that and determine, hey, this doesn't sound like a human that wrote it. It sounds like a computer that wrote it. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. In fact, now, like in my daughter's high school, like in certain classes, like they can't take their phones into classes, right? So that the professor can prevent them from using any sort of outside tool for their homework or their schoolwork there. It's also interesting when you think about what it takes to power AI, these quantum computing centers, right? These massive data centers, and they're building one here in Chicago right on the lake. So they take the hard drives that have all this data and do all this thinking, and they literally keep them submerged in cold water. But they consume huge amounts of electricity, right? So they command a lot of power here. But this is the future. This is what this is going to look like, not only in Chicago, but in cities all across America, are these quantum computing centers that'll be as large as this in most cases that deliver all the AI technology that we're using today. And one of the stats that was interesting too from the CEO of Anthropic, which is a AI company, that AI could eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs within 5 years. Now think about that. for the people that you know that have, like me, students in college. Some of them who went to school for, computers or coding or anything sort of data entry. In fact, in the investment space, right, as it gets smarter and we use tools to AI tools to engage with clients, there will be a race amongst firms to who can take our conversation with you and turn it into the paperwork that you need to transact whatever business you're trying to transact. Right now, a lot of that work is done through manual clickety clacking. So data, anything data entry is going to be sort of, I think, obsolete in the not too distant future. I was meeting with a CFO, a chief financial officer recently, and I took their fairly complicated P&L statement and I threw it into an AI tool and said, analyze this for me in a one-page summary. And it came back and I gave it to the CFO and I said, what do you think of this? And he said, well, that's spot on. How'd you do it? That was it. So anything that's really that data related could be, I think, in some trouble here in the not too distant future. We now have here in Chicago, for instance, we have robots delivering your meals, your DoorDash. If you want to get a delivery, there's these little robots that wheel around town that will bring you your delivery. It's AI. So it's here to stay. We're going to be interacting with it, that's for sure. And here's 5 fast facts that you can use to impress your friends at parties and things like that. Hey, AI can learn. That's different than how we typically used computers in the past. It can learn without being explicitly programmed, just like what we saw in the movie clip. It's already here. It's powering every day. It can detect diseases earlier than doctors. It can translate over 100 languages instantly and simultaneously. And it can write stories, poems, code. It can make movies. If you wanted to write a book about your life, it will do it. You want to write your memoirs? You absolutely can use AI to do it. I would
Wow.
I would fact check it before you get it published, though, is the only thing. Because it will use every piece of information it can find out about you out there in the World Wide Web and it'll make a story.